Racism. It's a word we hear all the time, an issue that feels like it's been around forever, but is also somehow alarmingly getting worse. With the resurgence of hate we're seeing on our streets and online, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed, or angry, or just plain confused. So today, we're going to try to make some sense of it. We're going to look at it through a powerful new lens, one that treats it like a medical diagnosis. Let's dive in.
First things first, we need to ground this conversation in reality. This isn't some abstract academic debate. The recent headlines, the marches, the hate, they represent real fear and real pain for people in our communities. Let's look at a few examples that really highlight why this is so critical to understand right now.
This quote from the Runnymede Trust just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? The stakes couldn't be higher. By invoking the memory of Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered in a racist attack at just 18 on what would have been his 51st birthday, well, it's a powerful reminder that this is quite literally a matter of life and death.
And you see, the hate on the streets, it doesn't just stay there. It has this ripple effect. As author Nova Reed points out, it follows people into the workplace on Monday morning. It creates this toxic, corrosive atmosphere of suspicion and anxiety, and it just completely erodes that sense of safety and belonging that everyone deserves at their job.
And then, of course, there is the raw physical violence. This quote from Sophia Mahmood really speaks to the brutal reality of hate crimes. It's not just a statistic in a news report, it's a violent assault that leaves deep, lasting scars, both physical and emotional. And it sends these waves of fear through entire communities. That trauma sticks around long after the headlines fade.
So, when you're faced with all of this, the violence, the fear, the deep-seated injustice, you have to ask, right? How do we even begin to get a handle on it? How can we possibly diagnose a problem this huge, this complex, so that we can even start to think about a solution? We need a new way of looking at it.
And that brings us to this really powerful analogy from psychologist Dr. Shungu M'gadzah. She suggests we try thinking about racism not just as a set of bad ideas, but as a virus, a kind of social contagion. Now, the point here isn't to oversimplify things. It's actually the opposite. It's about using a framework that, let's be honest, we all understand intimately now, a pandemic, to get a better grip on the mechanics of racism. Think about it. We all know about transmission, symptoms, and immunity. Dr. M'gadzah just applies that exact same language to help us see how racism actually works in our society.
So let's break down these parallels. Transmission? Well, it happens through contact, through conversations we have, and through the systems we live in. The symptoms? They're not just obvious, overt hate. They can be really subtle, like microaggressions. And here's a really key idea: asymptomatic carriers. These are people who might not be hateful at all, but they still spread harmful ideas or uphold biased systems, often without even realizing it. And finally, immunity. How do we build it? With knowledge, with education, by challenging stereotypes. Those are our social antibodies.
Okay, so if racism is a virus, it's not just one single strain. No, to properly diagnose it, we have to understand that it comes in different forms. Dr. M'gadzah actually identifies 5 distinct types of this virus, which helps us see the whole issue with a lot more nuance.
So here they are, the 5 interconnected types. It all starts with individual racism. That's one person discriminating against another. But when that individual has some kind of authority, it becomes individual plus power. And that can then feed into the big one, structural racism, where that bias gets embedded into our entire institutions. This system can even lead to intra-ethnic racism, things like colorism within a community. And finally, the framework points out how religious discrimination often intersects with all of these.
Let's just pause on number 3 for a second, because this one is huge. Structural racism. This is when the virus isn't just in the people, it's in the building itself. It is baked into the laws, the policies, the day-to-day practices of our society. And what that means is, even if every single person woke up tomorrow completely unbiased, the system itself would keep on producing unequal outcomes.
So what's driving this? Well, this quote from legal expert Lawrence Davis argues that while prejudice is the fuel, the real engine is economic. From his perspective, to actually tackle this stuff, you have to go after the systems, things like unequal pay and weak legal protections. The argument is, it's not enough to just change hearts and minds. You have to change the economic and legal structures themselves.
All right, so if that's the diagnosis, what's the prescription? How do we go from understanding this virus to actually building up some societal immunity against it? Well, this is where we start to see a path forward.
To help us figure out where we are and where we're going, Dr. M'gadzah offers this roadmap. It's called the 6 Stages Framework, and it shows a personal journey of awareness. According to this model, you might start out as unaware. Maybe you hold those colorblind views. But then the journey progresses. You become aware. You start questioning your own biases. You actively learn. And then, boom, you start seeing the bigger systemic picture. The final stage is leadership, which means becoming a true ally, someone who actually advocates for justice. The big takeaway here is that this is a journey, not a destination.
So how do we create the kinds of places where people can safely go on that journey? Well, the framework offers what it calls the 8 pillars of safety. These are the building blocks. They are building trust and belonging, high-quality listening, understanding emotional states, leaving issues at the door, setting and respecting boundaries, validating and nurturing identities, building bridges of empathy, and finally, championing and being a gateway. The idea is that these pillars create psychologically safe spaces where immunity to racism can actually start to grow.
Okay, so now it's time to turn that lens around. After looking at the diagnosis and the path to a cure, the question really becomes a personal one. Where do you fit into this picture? Because, at the end of the day, it all boils down to this. You can't fight a virus you don't understand. Everything we've talked about, the real-world impact, the virus analogy, the 5 types, the journey to allyship, it's all about building that foundation of understanding. Because it's only from that place of clarity that we can take action that's actually meaningful and effective.
And that brings us to our final question. This isn't just a thought exercise. Looking at that 6 stages framework, thinking about this whole virus analogy, what is the very next step you can take on your own journey? Maybe it's learning more. Maybe it's listening differently. Maybe it's speaking up when you hear something. Whatever it is, that one single step, that's how we begin to build a world that is more immune to hate.